Hi y'all! Today's gonna be a little bit of a different kind of video. I have been stewing on this one for a while, and I have finally aligned my motivation with my frustration and sat down to make it today. So today's video is very bluntly called, "You don't want an eating disorder." And that is the only time I'm going to use those words, and I'm going to block them out when I say it because we need some kind of plausible deniability for the YouTube algorithm. Just gonna say ED, we might as well be talking about erectile dysfunction, right? And that is because for whatever reason, this is considered a taboo subject, probably because of pro-ana websites and things like that in the past. We'll get into that. All that to say, it's not something that the algorithm loves to monetize, even if we have a positive message around it. So even if this video gets demonetized, I don't care. It is a message that I feel so compelled to get out on my platform, however far that platform can reach, because I have been watching so much content lately that is commentary on a resurgence in the idea that there are body type trends, and that the ones that are coming about right now have to do with the early aughts Y2K super skinny heroin chic kind of thing, which, as the not so proud owner of an ED in my life for a very, very long time, I am not any kind of professional or physician or anything, but I do have a lot of personal experience to share, and I'm really comfortable talking about it. I've made a lot of friends in the community over the years, worldwide, healing these kinds of things, and if I ever seem kind of cavalier talking about it, it's not because I don't take it seriously, it's because I think that we shouldn't make these kinds of topics radioactive. We need to put them out in the open, and today I hope to both really, by sharing my story, save a lot of people a lot of pain, but also I want to kind of dispel some misconceptions around what it is to have an ED, because I feel like people who are friends and loved ones of people who have an ED also could use some help. So this might be a long video. I have a lot to say. I'm gonna put some makeup on just to keep my hands busy. I might finish my makeup before I get done talking, so we'll see. But let's go ahead and jump in, y'all. So I want to start first of all by talking about the appeal. I want to do this because it's going to make the people who might be caught in the clutches of this mindset feel more seen and understood. And also I want to let folks in on what the mindset is like for someone who does consciously or maybe passively decide to restrict their diet. I'm not going to talk in any specific terms about numbers or anything like that, especially about my own experience, because I know you, I see you, I am you. We all love to compare ourselves, okay? And I'm not going to give you that catnip today. I'm not gonna do it. I know y'all. And those things can be kind of triggering. So what is the appeal, right? Because of course this is such a conscious decision. It's kind of a slippery slope is what it is, but it will become more clear as we go. Back in my day, I'm 37 years old. What are we using on my face here? I'm 37 years old, and the way that this was sort of popularized in my era was through Tumblr, and Tumblr is definitely making a resurgence alongside all of the other things that were popular when I was younger, right? Which is this 2000s era, 2010s era, tragic girl aesthetic. We're all trying to make people kind of worried about us, right? And I get it. I get the appeal to that because it makes you feel special. It makes you feel special to be wounded or to have some kind of reason for attention, right? I mean, there's that weird phenomenon when I was in school where the girl who was on crutches got the most attention and everybody was like, I want crutches. What were we thinking? But at the same time, there is just this need to almost outsource our specialness so that it's not something that we feel like is anyone else's to reclaim. It's like, no, I'm going to have control over this. I'm going to be my own tragic muse, and I'm going to basically take control. I get it, especially when you're not accepted by certain people. It's like, okay, well, they control the narrative on X, Y, and Z. This is something that I have control over, which is my weight. This is something that I can feel moral superiority about. That is the biggest thing with an ED, is moral superiority. I would say that that is the biggest appeal, is that like, and that's what you're seeing on TikTok right now too, is all these girls just being like, I feel so sorry for these people that I'm skinnier than, or whatever. And it's like, okay, yes, we have learned on TikTok somehow to put the finest point on things. I mean, just so blunt, no one buries the lead on anything. Nothing is subtle anymore. Nothing is implied. People just come out and say stuff. And the use of the word ugly just appalls me. I'm like, no, stop saying that. No one's, stop that. Anyway, pearl clutching aside, it's very clear that the moral superiority is a huge part of the appeal, because there is a morality that our society assigns to your size, right? It's like, if thin is good, and, you know, larger bodies are less responsible or take less care of themselves. Let me say one thing, is that an ED can be any size. Anybody, no matter what they look like, can have an ED, okay? Just because someone looks a certain way does not mean that they do or don't. Like, just get that out of your head, first of all. Second of all, there are so many body types in the world, and some of them do not have the like genetic makeup to be like a certain size, you know, the same way that others don't have the genetic makeup to be curvy, or some don't have the genetic makeup, I don't have boobs. You know what I mean? Like, people are made certain ways, and like trying to force ourselves to be like a trendy body type not only is impossible, but it goes completely against what I think the meaning of life is, which is to learn to acknowledge your individuality and learn to love yourself. All roads, I'm gonna spoil the ending here, all roads lead back to needing to cultivate true self-love, and that will never trend on the internet. It requires consciously unplugging from those things, and we're gonna keep kind of touching back on that. Like, life is a spiral staircase, okay? The other thing, of course, that is shoving this in our collective faces at the moment is obviously the Ozempic craze, and I get it. I totally get it. And I think that the big phenomenon, I mean, God, if you don't know what Ozempic is, it's the diabetes drug that is now being used to help people lose weight. And it is miraculous for some people. I mean, miraculous in the sense of losing weight, like for almost everybody who uses it, but it has a ton of side effects. It doesn't work for everyone. Jamie French did an amazing video about this, about how she took it and she was willing to basically endure the horrible side effects of it. And even with that, it just never, she didn't lose an ounce. You know, it just didn't work on her. And I also have people close to me who have used it, and the side effects are just so awful, like vomiting and just things like that are just so bad that it's not worth it. Like, it's just such a quality of life downgrade that it's not something that they can integrate into their lifestyle. But that aside, all the people who seem to make it look like it is so easy, you know, a lot of these celebrities who have just dropped so much weight all of a sudden and admit that they're using it, it does start to have this weird effect on the body positivity movement that led up to this, because a lot of people who were trying to be fixtures in that community and strong voices in that community, when given the opportunity, took the opportunity to be thin. And that really annoyed a lot of people, confused a lot of people, and made a lot of people feel really disillusioned, because it's like, I'm looking up to you because, you know, this celebrity looks like me, and therefore they're comfortable with their body, I should be comfortable with my body. And then they show that even if they were comfortable with their body before, there is a more ideal situation for them if they can achieve it in, you know, an easier way. And the, what do they call them? Semaglutides, whatever, made it very possible for people with a lot of money to be able to do that, you know, the people who have the money and have the access. So that has also kind of reignited the conversation around this, and I think made weight and the thinness of celebrities, it's brought it back into a place where we feel really comfortable seeing it and talking about it in the media. I don't think we ever stopped feeling comfortable about it, but like in the early 2000s, actually really, you know, through the 90s, but I would say like through the early 2000s, 2010s, every tabloid was just showing these really unflattering photos of people, celebrities who had just, like, you know, taken their weight loss journey too far for one reason or another, probably because of the pressures of being in that business. And the way that they were talked about the way that they were discussed, the way that they were vilified, created this, I mean, obviously, women are very used to this, but this like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing, where it's like, you're going to be criticized for being too thin, you're going to be criticized for being too thick, you're going to be criticized for your means of getting there. Like, there is no winning, and the only winning would be to stop commenting on women's bodies in that way. But the fact is that young people are now being led down the primrose path once again towards almost like the glamorization of like the mean girl aesthetic, right? Of if you can find someone lesser than you and you can find some kind of way of expressing superiority over them, then like that's cool and ironic and a means of survival among your peers. And I find that really disappointing. First of all, as a person who's a victim of a lot of bullying, but also it's just such a giant step backwards for us as a society, because it's reigniting, reinvigorating all of this really commonplace conversation about women's bodies and being able to criticize them in the abstract. That's normalized, and normalized even more so in the younger generations, because we've already kind of been through it and we're just like, I'm not doing that again. But they are like prepped and primed for it, and they're so plugged into social media. So that all kind of falls into like the glamorization of having a small, very small body in some cases. There's also the belonging and acceptance angle, because like I said, when you aren't being accepted, a lot of times, you know, bullies and things like that will make you feel a certain way about your body. And you feel like if you can change, you'll start getting more positive attention. And a lot of times that is the case, but the positive attention will flip if people perceive it to be too much and things like that. And you start to realize that you're like measuring your worth on other people's opinions. Again, all roads lead back to needing to cultivate true self-love, which is the hardest path, but it is the one that every other shortcut is going to lead you back to over and over and over again, so you might as well start walking it. And so the belonging and acceptance angle is so temporary in comparison to belonging to yourself and accepting yourself, because you're the one you're gonna have to wake up and face every single morning, and your acceptance of yourself matters the most. And it's something that is also, once it's installed, the most unshakable thing about you, because if you are a product of other people's opinions of you, then that also means that how your day goes depends on whether people's opinions of you are the same, or if they change, or if they're good, or if they're bad. You don't have a say, essentially. And so the best thing to do is to be the person who gets to decide those things. And again, it's a hard road, and it really requires consciously unplugging from this system that wants to spoon feed you what you're supposed to look like in order to be worthy in this world. And I'm telling you that that road doesn't lead to self-worth. It just doesn't. No amount of other people's opinion of you could ever fill the cup that is inside you, that needs to be filled with your own self-love. It just doesn't, it will never fill that. It will never, ever, ever fill that. You can only fill that yourself. So I feel like I'm like screaming at the youths as a parent here, but you know, pass this around like very self-servingly, right? I guarantee this is going to get demonetized, but regardless, like I feel like this is the kind of messaging that needs to be put out there to counterbalance the narrative that's being circulated so ubiquitously right now on TikTok. And I don't blame TikTok necessarily, although, you know, some people do and some people should, but it's more so that just like that's the place that they all are right now, all the youths, and that's what they're discussing. That's where they're discussing these things. It's basically like a microcosm of the zeitgeist. So glamorization, fitting in, control, moral superiority, and like the woundedness, the wanting to be special, those are kind of the appeals of it. It's very much just like, it seems like a very easy answer when everything around you feels like it's outside of your control, which is a lot of how you feel as an adolescent. Sometimes like buckling down on something so concrete can seem really appealing, but now I'm going to share the reality with you. This is from my own standpoint about why it is not appealing and why it is not something that you ultimately want, okay? So here is what happens when you decide that you're going to have an ED. And I say decide, I mean, I think that we decide that we're going to make a change. We decide that we're going to make a restriction. We decide that we're going to establish some kind of limitation in our life for any of the aforementioned reasons, and that we're just gonna kind of see how far it takes us. Some people, it is about, you know, being as small as possible. Some people, it is an obsession with numbers. Some people, it is like an illusion. For me, it was an illusion of like the purity of my food, and that being something that I, you know, if I could control that, then I could be like different from everybody else, and an ED could actually be sustainable for me. Like, oh, you call it an ED, but like I've made it into a healthy lifestyle, and I've completely like outsmarted the system. No, you're not gonna outsmart the system, okay? Here's how your body works. Your body gives you intuitive hunger cues. Hunger cues are good. We like hunger cues. Eating intuitively is something that you will miss sorely if you get into the pits of an ED. And if you do what I did, I'm just going to speak from, again, personal experience. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. When you push past your hunger cues in pursuit of restricting, right? Of just saying to yourself, like, I am going to have more discipline than that. I have told myself some kind of, I don't know, lie to convince myself that like I'm thirsty, not hungry, or you know, I'm eating emotionally or something like that. Regardless, like there's so much messaging out there like that, and honestly, it was so bad when we were kids because it was being foisted at our parents so much, at our moms, and so it was really everywhere. Like the weight loss messaging was everywhere, and it was really perceived as very positive. So we hardly ever questioned it. Now we know that it is very like damaging and toxic. So you tell yourself these kind of commonplace lies, right? And maybe you'll start counting calories, which by the way, calories are what your body runs on. Calories are not a bad thing. My parents' generation turned calories into this villain where it was like, oh, you need to have a snack that's only so-and-so amount of calories and that's gonna make you full. And it's like, no, calories are what give you energy. So if you eat fewer of them, you will have less energy. It is actually, to some extent, about how you get those calories and how long that stays in your body, because that's going to give you more sustained energy. So like those little packs of like however many calories that they're like, oh, this will sustain you, you know, this will tide you over so that you know, for your cravings. I love that they call them cravings. I'm like, you mean intuitive hunger cues from your body? When you eat something that's just like a pure little cracker or whatever like that, it's gonna burn up in your body so fast that you're just like, guilty, you know, you're like, I'm guilty because like that didn't sustain me, and then you feel like you have to like mind over matter, like, you know, push past those hunger cues. And when you do that, when you push past hunger cues, eventually they stop. And you would think, oh, well then I've done it, right? I have solved the issue. I have transcended this, you know, this human weakness of having the urge to be hungry all the time. Nay, 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 my friends. No. Because as soon as you take away your body's autonomous function of telling you when it's hungry and telling you what it needs, because it's not just a binary of hunger, right? There are things like water will taste sweet when you don't have enough salt in your body, which means that you're not going to retain hydration well enough. Or there are things that like you crave, like when you're pregnant or something like that, or you'll have just really specific cravings sometimes based on truly what your body needs. Your body knows so much more than you do. That is in my mouth. What did I use? I don't remember what I put on, but it's giving me white ring of death. Sorry, y'all. Basically, you have taken something that your body has always known how to do on its own ever since you were born. Not just tell you that you're hungry, but also tell you what it needs. And you are now relying on your brain, your stupid little human brain. I mean that as we all have stupid little human brains, because our nervous systems and our bodies that are kind of managing all of our hormones and all of the stuff that's telling us to be hungry or not hungry or whatever, all of those things are so much more complex and so much smarter than we are in order to be able to send us those hunger cues that when we try and manage them ourselves, it's like going from a supercomputer to trying to just like do math long form by hand, okay? It's gonna take up all of your mental energy and all of your time, and it's going to make you incredibly anxious. Oh, and by the way, now you're at a calorie deficit because you are restricting so hard, and so you have less energy for your brain to run on, less energy for your body to run on, which starts to make you feel guilty because, oh, if you did eat something, you probably need to exercise it away now, right? Because we have to zero out at the end of the day or have less than we took in because God knows, I know y'all because I know me. And so now you have guilt on top of hunger, on top of fatigue, on top of the mental weight of trying to constantly manage whether or not you are allowed to put food in your body. That, my friends, is what is known as hell on earth. You are in a personal hell inside your own head of your own making, of your own perpetuation, and it is the unhappiest you will ever be. You will want to sleep all day because your body has no energy. You will question whether you're doing enough at all times. Like, I think that there is this misconception that with an ED, you reach a point where you're finally happy. Let me tell you something. When your body loses a ton of weight, like to an unnatural degree, to where your body is clearly fighting it and you are fighting against it. These things are definitely on a spectrum. I don't think of an ED as being something that's binary. It's not just body mass that you lose, it's also muscle and the kind of natural shape of your body. And so as the natural shape of your body distorts itself, so too does it distort your perception of it. And I mean, we talk about body dysmorphia all the time, but there's no quicker way to trigger body dysmorphia than to start making yourself look like something that isn't proportioned like a human, that like, you know what I mean, that you would typically look at. And so you start judging things on a different scale. You keep moving the goalpost on yourself as to what's acceptable. And it is an unwinnable contest with a monster inside of your head, okay? Like, there is no winning an ED. There's no winning. You are going to find yourself hating yourself, just waking up every day miserable, trapped inside of a cycle of trying to figure out whether you're allowed to eat that day, and shaming yourself for every bite that you take, and constantly comparing yourself to your old self, constantly comparing yourself to other people, constantly looking for this dopamine hit, this catnip of moral superiority in order to keep you going. And there's the fear of doing anything else. There's the fear of ever going back because you're afraid that if you take one bite of something that's not on your menu, you're gonna wake up obese tomorrow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow, it sucks. It sucks so much. It sucks so much. And like, anytime I've ever seen an influencer with like a large platform be honest enough about this in their own life, they will show photos of themselves at their smallest and they will say, that's the unhappiest I've ever been in my entire life. And it's so true. And it doesn't mean that they did it wrong and that you're gonna do it right and that they lost and you're gonna win because you're gonna be the exception to the rule and you're gonna figure out how to manage it and be happy, because nothing could possibly make you happier than being thin as a rail. Guess what? When you deprive your body, you feel it. You starve. You are hungry, you are miserable, you are so tired, you're so paranoid, the body checking and everything like that, because your skin doesn't look normal. You start to grow hair on the outside of your body because your body needs to insulate itself because it's cold. Your hair falls out, you get acne, you're malnourished, your digestion dies, okay? And I don't want to speak for everybody else, but like, I feel very strongly that a lot of the things that are wrong with my digestion are because I spent so many years depriving myself of like normal amounts of food and trying to constantly outwit my body, when the facts are the facts. You need food in order to live. Those are the facts. You're not going to outsmart that. So as much as you look at any of these people, celebrities, people who you see on TikTok or anything like that, and they seem like they're doing so well and they're thriving, they've outsmarted the process, that is just smoke and mirrors. That is just social media. Those people are either miserable or on their way to miserable, okay? You are not on a road to a good place. It is never going to put you at a destination that you want to be at when you're on that road. All roads lead back to what? Authentic self-love. I'm going to provide examples of the phrases, the questions, the accusations that you'll get sometimes that are very commonplace in someone who has, you know, an ED's life. So the first one is like, if someone actually finds out that you are in recovery or that you have come to terms with the fact that you have a problem, they will say, oh, so you admit it. You have an ED. This need for people to admit that they have an ED is so stupid, because they're first of all treating it like it's something that the person did on purpose, not that they are suffering from some devious thing in the shadows from everybody else. And when really it's like, no, I've been suffering from this and it has nothing to do with you. So admitting it to you is not you winning some kind of superiority over me. It's not some big secret, because EDs exist on a really big spectrum, like I said. And so the difference between having disordered eating patterns and like something that's categorized as an ED in the DSM is not important. What's important is if it's causing you enough emotional distress or enough physical distress that it's something that needs to be addressed. And like, that's not something that is binary. That's not something that needs to be admitted to someone as some kind of deep, dark secret. It's hard to explain, but it's like, it's not like a cancer diagnosis. It's not like, oh, now that you've admitted it, we can start fixing you, or we can put you on medication, or we can start making you heal. It's like, no. Because just because you know, which you could have told sometimes by looking at someone, sometimes by living with someone, you could be wrong, you could be right, people could be of any size. It all exists on a spectrum. There's no specific body type or specific person who has an ED. And there are EDs that are not associated with weight loss, okay? That is not like a stepping stone in a path towards healing. That is just your discovery of something and your arbitrary categorization of something that is happening to someone else on a very like broad spectrum, okay? So there's no accomplishment in making someone admit it. I'm gonna block the word out, but you'll know what I'm saying. Another thing that you'll hear a lot of is, you know, people being like, wow, she's so skinny, she looks sick. Our generation discovered that word, and it was the way that we insulted people who, you know, made us uncomfortable or whatever. And it's like, again, what if you're right? There's like a high likelihood that you're right. What have you accomplished by saying that? Like, that's not something that is going to lead someone to a road to recovery. That is not a stepping stone toward helping someone. And accusing someone of something like that, again, is not outing any new facts, because that person is a victim of something. It's not something that has anything to do with you. That person who is, and I said I was going to explain the whole like victim thing. I consider victim in this case to be the appropriate term, because I think that there is this, I don't know, there's this like animosity towards people who choose to use an ED to have a smaller body as if it's some kind of personal affront to other people and it's some kind of referendum on them, when it's not about them at all. It's about this internalized paranoia and self-consciousness and a feeling of lack of control that someone has decided to harness whatever control they felt like they could get their hands on through this specific means. And now they have a monster in their brain, okay? Now they have this horrifying hellscape that is their consciousnness, because their consciousness is just tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, calories, food, in, out, in, out, in, out. Have you done enough? How many hours are left in the day? What can we do to outwit this next like round of hunger? Like, that person is a victim of something that has taken hold of them. It is not a conscious decision to let it go that far, to be that miserable. And when you're at that point, it is not something that you are enjoying the benefits of. And finally, in this category, the whole like eat a cheeseburger kind of thing, that works the opposite way. I think that's a very like you know, commonly known thing at this point. It's very commonly understood that criticizing someone in the way of saying like, oh, you know, you can afford to eat a cheeseburger, you know, oh, I'm like, or saying that you're worried about someone or something, like it works the opposite way, because that is the moral superiority angle of somebody saying like, maybe you need a cheeseburger. I don't. I've transcended hunger. You mean you've transcended your body's signals for survival? That's not really an accomplishment, but I will say it is really hard. So when you do it, you kind of feel like you can't go back. So while from the outside, it does seem like, why are you making this conscious decision every moment of your life to keep yourself trapped in this cycle? But from the inside of it, there is no other option, because to go back to a different reality would be to reverse all the work you've done and lose this thing that has really intrinsically become a part of you, that you feel like is a really big part of your identity, is the way that your body looks. Before we talk about what we can do about this, I want to talk about recovery. The recovery is not anywhere near as bad as being within this terrible cycle, but at the same time, perhaps it will discourage folks from wanting to get on this road in the first place, because it's not fun, okay? It's only good in the sense that you start being able to like free up space in your brain, and finding intuitive eating again, finding your body like knowing how to do something and letting it do it again is a really great feeling, because you're like, oh, the sky's not gonna fall. Like when I stopped counting calories and the sky didn't fall, it was a revelation. I was like, how many other things in my life can I apply this to? How many other things am I thinking that I have control over that is just such an illusion that I can let go of the illusion of control and just be free of it, you know? Because once you kind of find that like, no, there is no outside judgment, there is no punishment for just letting yourself exist and not being special in that sense, and not being in control of everything in that sense, and that all hell's not gonna break loose. In fact, quite the opposite. Like you realize like, why have I been doing this to myself when I could have just been free this whole time? But when you do decide that it is time to recover, and you decide that you're going to start the act of refeeding. Refeeding is pretty interesting. I took part in an online community where I actually met a couple of friends who I still stay in touch with, and this was actually on Tumblr. It was a Tumblr called Healing Charlotte, and this girl Charlotte had it real bad. And she was having folks basically like follow her and keep her accountable to her recovery, and watching her basically reclaim her life, which was very cool. And also, it's not linear. Like you watch her, you know, going to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. Look, it's not linear. You have to give yourself some grace. Like you're gonna freak out sometimes during recovery. You're going to. And honestly, like for a long time afterwards, you're still gonna freak out sometimes. It's always gonna be there. The further you install that software, the more of your brain you let it get to, the more remnants are gonna be there forever. So like, that's why I'm saying you don't want it. You don't want it, because it's not going to ever completely leave. You're always going to have, like, I'm still unpacking, like, why I feel afraid to eat certain things. And I'll be like, oh, that's like a remnant from when I used to fear calories, and like, why do I think that now? Like, why do I still have that weird kind of instinctive reaction to that particular food? I'm still like unpacking those things and discovering them behind kind of trapdoors in my brain. And a little anecdote, actually. One person, a friend of mine back in Austin, this was years ago, because I started recovery when I was 25. So I had what I would consider to be an ED for about 10 years. Honestly, before I recognized what it was, okay? Like I was so in denial. I remember a friend of mine who was blessed with one of those like vintage figures, you know what I mean? Like she just had like the boobs and the hips and the little tiny waist and everything. And I just remember, you know, I always thought that she was drop dead gorgeous, like effortlessly beautiful. And she said to me one time when we were out together, you know, whenever I'm tempted to eat something that I know that I shouldn't, I say, what would Kackie do? Kackie wouldn't eat that. And I'm like, oh my God, don't do what I would do. I'm broken. I'm miserable. And then I'm like, I'm miserable. I'm miserable. Like, I have got to figure this out. Like, why am I so unhappy? Why am I accepting this reality as my reality? Why am I letting myself be this unhappy at my own hands? You know, it's not a snap decision that you make, and it's not a linear recovery process, but what does happen when you refeed is the first thing that's going to happen, and just it does pass. You have to prepare yourself for it mentally because it's discouraging at first. Your body is going to regain weight in a weird way. The first thing that it does is, because you've been starving, it's going to insulate your organs. And so around sort of your midsection, it's going to feel like you are bigger there than you should be, because you have starved yourself and your body is insulating your organs for survival. Okay, like that kind of hits hard. Like, you should recognize that for what it is and let it happen, because wow, you pushed your body way too far in the other direction. You kind of deserve it at that point, okay? But it will go away. It will equalize itself back out, and it doesn't take that terribly long. You just kind of got to dissociate for a little while and understand that it's for the greater good. So refeeding is also marked by something called very cleverly titled extreme hunger. And extreme hunger is exactly what it sounds like, and that is that once you start refeeding, your body will demand food about every couple of hours just in order to like keep satisfying the machine. You will not be able to think about anything else, so put a plan in place, okay? My plan was bananas and Nutella. I just kept them at my desk or in, you know, in the kitchen, easily in arm's reach. And that was what I did to do my refeeding. I was just like, okay, like satisfy the monster, the new monster, the one that's like, we're gonna live, and get back to work. You know, don't think about it too hard. You are doing what your body needs to survive. And you have, again, done like kind of a big number on it by doing what you did. And undoing that is also going to be equally strange. And so just accept that for what it is. Just commit yourself to the process, and I do recommend getting a buddy. My friend Sophie was my buddy. She's in Switzerland. Actually, she's in California now, but she was in Switzerland, and like, it didn't matter. We met on Tumblr and we were each other's buddy. And we were just like, wow, recovery is really hard. Wow, this is happening to my body, whatever. Like, those kinds of things can be really, really helpful. Find a community online, and I don't know where they are anymore, but I'm sure that they exist, because obviously if this is resurging, so too will the recovery communities, hopefully. And always just understand that you're not alone. Like, this is not something that you invented. You're not the first person that this has ever happened to, and there is a pathway back to being functional and enjoying your life again. But it would be a lot better to not have to do it in the first place. So my physical recovery probably only took about a year, but my mental recovery took longer than that. You really do like spend a long time trying to kind of find your balance again in terms of like what you're comfortable with. And for me, it was, I had to find a balance of exercise in my life that was healthy and sustainable. Like, I did high intensity interval training. Like, that was really good for me for a while, because there is absolutely no way that you can do that kind of weight training without eating a ton of food. Like, you just have to. And so it started making me understand the connection between feeding myself and having energy, because I could see the direct correlation of not feeding myself enough and not having enough energy. And then, you know, it made a huge difference when I did eat enough and had enough energy. And I'm like, oh, calories are fuel. Ugh. You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of stuff that I had to like learn for myself, even though someone had told me it a million times. And, you know, I was a runner for a long time. I don't recommend cardio for this kind of recovery, because like, as you know, a remittance or, you know, some kind of mitigation for the feeling of like, oh, I'm gonna gain weight, because, and we're kind of getting into my advice now. Let's just let's talk about my advice for the victim. And I'm sorry if you don't like being called the victim. I call myself the victim, okay? Because there was a monster in my brain. And now the monster's still there, but he's very small and we know each other very intimately. And I tell him to shut up like 9 times out of 10, okay? And I still have a buddy. I'm not going to tell who the buddy is because she probably doesn't want me to tell people about that. But like, I definitely have that buddy in my life that I can be like, guess who decided to pop up because I'm having a bad time, you know, and we can like talk each other through that stuff. So my advice for recovery and for sustained recovery for people who have done this as a means of control is for you to rechannel needing to be smaller into being stronger. Because like I said, strength training makes food non-negotiable. And the reason that I don't recommend, and this is from personal experience again, channeling that into just any old form of exercise like cardio, like running or something like that, is because that still keeps you in that nightmarish push-pull cycle of calories in, calories out. You gotta stop thinking like that. It has to become a love and an appreciation for your body as the machine, this intuitive machine that it is and how it knows how to be already. And if you are continuing to just think about food as a bad thing and exercise as a punishment for having consumed it, then you are not recovering, you know, that you're really only perpetuating it. You're just putting a band-aid on it. And I do feel like, especially because when you are hungry all the time, you are so weak feeling that if you can channel it into building muscle and getting strong, it is euphoric to feel again what your body is truly capable of when you give it what it needs. Even if you don't end up, you know, staying in some kind of like weight training or something like that, I do recommend going and doing something like that for a while and having a protein shake in the morning, you know what I mean? Making sure that you get your eggs and your, you know what I mean? Like make sure you get the calories that your body needs, and then you go in there and you watch your body change in ways that like are stronger, and you feel stronger, and you wake up with energy, or you exhaust yourself because you physically exhausted yourself, not because you were starving yourself, you realize that like this body was meant to do so much more. And it is so empowering. It truly is that feeling of like, guys, I'm gonna live. You know, I'm gonna live. I did that, you know, and I think that, you know, when I started, it was out of paranoia, and then it became something that was so much more balanced for me. And now I just do yoga. I've been doing yoga for about 15 years. So, I mean, it was definitely something that I did more intensively and with a lot of other things before I recovered. And now it's the only thing that I do. But seeing what your body is capable of can be really empowering. And then what I have done, and again, this is just me, because it is something that lives in me all the time, is the best thing for me to do is to make my meals automatic. Have exactly what I'm very ADHD, and so eating the same thing every single day is wonderful for me. I have a very good schedule in place. I know what I'm gonna have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know I have snacks on hand, you know, things like that. And I know when I want to treat, and I know when you know what I mean? Like in those kinds of things. And I try to always say yes to myself when my brain wants something, because I said no for so long that I almost do it wrong on purpose just to prove to myself that the sky's not gonna fall. Like these are still mental exercises that are like part of my everyday. But the automation essentially of what I eat, and the fact that I do, you know, make sure that I kind of find something that I don't mind eating for a while, and I get on a kick of like a certain kind of breakfast, like, you know, big bowl of yogurt with granola or like fruit or whatever in there, and it's gonna make me full enough that, you know, when I go to yoga, I'm not gonna get just cashed in the first 5 minutes or something. And then my lunch, I want it to be something that is filling but isn't going to bloat me. So I have been having a gigantic protein smoothie for probably the last 10 years. Some kind of gigantic protein smoothie. I add protein, I add all kinds of spinach and stuff like that because my digestion's broken now. And so I am not amazing at digesting greens and roughage that I should be getting for iron purposes and things like that. And so all of those things, I make sure to put them in a smoothie every day, and then that doesn't keep me full all day. And so I typically have some kind of snack in the afternoon. I'll have like charcuterie or something like that. Sometimes I'll just, you know, treat myself to ice cream or whatever I want. And then for dinner, you know, I am a protein monster. I just basically center my meals around making sure I get enough, especially my nighttime meals, around making sure I get enough protein. And another thing is that like once your digestion is kind of broken, one of the big benefits, this is such like weird stuff that's like basically like only if you've been through recovery do you understand why this is even important. But like the other thing about being strong is that it gives your brain something to kind of concentrate on when you're bloated, because bloat is one of the hardest things for someone who's had an ED to like sit with. It makes you panic. You're like, everything's changing, everything's out of my control. And all it really is just like your body has gas, okay? You just need to fart, like just like sleep on it. It's gonna be okay. But when you're strong and you know that you're strong, there is like this mental calmness of being like, I understand that this is different. And again, I hope that's not triggering for anybody. I want this to only be helpful because I want people who have this kind of weird stuff going on in their head to feel seen by this, and I want to not normalize the behaviors, but normalize talking about them, because it is a very lonely place. It is a place that the monster in there would love to have you know that you are alone. It's, you know, it's very conducive to depression and anxiety. Like the two are, you know, pretty good friends. It's a pretty common coping mechanism for that kind of thing. And so that is a cycle that loves to live in solitude and loves to convince you that you are alone. And it is so much more important, I think, to talk about these kinds of things not as a taboo thing, but as something that is actually extraordinarily common. Extraordinarily common, because there's so many influences in our lives that this could become the answer to. You know, that's somebody's like, well, I guess this is, you know, in order to look a certain way for this certain thing, or in order to, you know, be accepted in this certain thing, like whatever. It doesn't matter if, you know, what your gender is, your age, your size, whatever, this can happen to anyone. And we all do this weird mental gymnastics trying to like justify either making a good decision or a not so good decision for ourselves. Advice for family and friends. There's really not many good things that you can do, and most people just do things that aren't that helpful. The whole like criticism as a form of concern, or the kind of passive aggressive comments because you're afraid of taking the issue head on, or the misunderstanding of what is actually happening, and therefore you kind of don't really feel comfortable talking about it, and so you just sort of hedge around it and stuff like that. And most of the time, if you don't know what you're talking about, you should find someone who does. Like if you really want to intervene with someone, you need to find someone who has been through it and have them, you know, talk to the person, because criticizing them abstractly or passively, passive-aggressively, is only going to make them feel more alienated. They need to feel included, they need to feel understood, and they need to feel like they're not alone. And I think that the best way to do that is to have someone that they respect who has been through it, find a way to be in contact with them, because it doesn't mean that you are giving up your sense of self in order to recover. It does not mean that you are automatically just going to like have to succumb to looking completely different than you do when you think that you are in control. Like it doesn't have to be that. There is a way of managing your life and letting your body manage your hunger and eating intuitively. There is a way to do it and still love the way that you look. And the only other thing is for parents to try to be conscious of the media that your kids are consuming, be more involved, and try to cultivate, and I say this as a parent, try to cultivate true confidence. I cultivate true confidence in my kid by letting him know that I've always got his back, that he is full of potential, that he is incredible, that he's beautiful, that he doesn't have to do anything in order to earn my love. He doesn't need to do anything to fulfill, you know, my needs or anything like that. And what that does is it teaches him that like he'll always have me no matter what, and it makes him more confident to go out into the world and try things. And then when he fails at things and he gets upset because he wasn't good at them, I say, there's no better feeling than getting good at something that you weren't good at to begin with, kind of thing. Like, those kinds of very simple things that we find to be just intuitive, young kids still need those kinds of things told to them. And I think that if I had been told those things as a kid, I mean, no shade to my parents. My parents are great. My mother is one of my best friends. I love her so much. But I think that as a generation, if we had been told that more often and been given more kind of like unprovoked approval, unprovoked encouragement, affirmation, reassurance, outside of our accomplishments, outside of us doing or being any certain thing in any certain moment, we might not have felt the need to cry out for attention in the ways that we did. And I only hope that as a generation who already suffered this, we can use that to try and save the next generations the trouble. And like I said, the thing that life is a spiral staircase, I come back to constantly. I'm not claiming that I've solved everything in the world, but it's like the lesson that just beats you upside the head for the rest of your life and will always do so, so you might as well get a head start on it, is that all roads, when it comes to actual happiness and actual fulfillment and not taking these, like, you know, shortcuts that don't go anywhere, all roads lead back to cultivating true self-love, and that's never going to trend on the internet. That's never going to be something that anybody is going to make a hashtag about, because there's no easy, quick answer. There's no soundbite about it. About learning who you are, learning what you love and what makes you tick and what makes you beautiful. And it's a lifelong, beautiful journey of finding that, like, even though you're good at something that isn't necessarily valued by your peers when you're X age, if you keep pursuing it, it's going to become the thing that you do. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. And that the more of those things that you can pull out of your soul and make manifest in the world, the more you are honoring your individuality, the more you become the person that other people look up to. You become a leader in the sense of understanding yourself, and not people wanting to be like you in all of your interests, but people wanting to be like you in the sense that they want to know themselves better. And you can help people learn to know themselves better. And so it's like, the internet right now is literally doing the opposite. It is trying to homogenize these kids. It's trying to homogenize everyone. It is trying to encapsulate everything inside of a hashtag, inside of an aesthetic. It's trying to teach everyone to look the same in order to be cool. It's teaching us how to judge each other and the words that we're using and what the standards are that we should be comparing ourselves to. And it's never going to lead anywhere positive. The only thing that they can do is get off of there, unplug, go be with real people and see real things. That internet, that particular part of the internet, is never going to facilitate true happiness. And we have to encourage our kids, we have to encourage each other, we have to really encourage ourselves to constantly refocus that comparison energy back into acknowledging that we are our happiest when we are living in our own paradigm, where our opinion of ourselves and how much we're honoring who we really are is what really brings us satisfaction and makes us love the person that we see in the mirror when we wake up in the morning. So it's not easy. If it were, we wouldn't have all of these shortcuts. We wouldn't have all of these quick fixes that we're constantly trying to grab at some kind of artificial idea of loving ourselves. It is the long way and it is the hard way, but that's the point. And it's about enjoying that instead of constantly feeling like we need to get to some kind of destination and stay there and be done. That's not the point of life. So I feel like I just got so much out that I needed to get out. So I'm really, I hope y'all found this valuable. And I really like how my makeup turned out. Yeah, I hope that this came across in any way that I intended it to. I only wanted this to be positive messaging in the sense that I want to save people the heartache and the pain and the poor health and the time wasted. God, I wasted my 20s hating my body, my beautiful, beautiful body. I wasted, just hating it. And I look back at pictures and I'm like, what? One of the best quotes I've ever heard is, you know, love yourself right now, because in 10 years you'll look back and wish you had Okay, you'll be like, wow, I was so beautiful. Enjoy it now. If you don't love yourself in real time, if you're only loving a past or future, you know, imaginary version of yourself, you're never going to love yourself. You're going to reach the end of your life and never have actually loved yourself. So who wants that? Not me. I love me. So anyway, oh man, I hope y'all found this valuable. If you did, please do give the video a thumbs up. Pass it on to people if you think they'll find it valuable, even though it's incredibly long-winded. I feel like I made some points. And yeah, subscribe while you're here. I love y'all very much, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye.